Hello, my fellow chatterers and book lovers, and anyone else who's popped in because you're curious about what this is or you have got a bit lost. Welcome everyone, I'm Chatty, this is my channel Chatty the Mad Chatter, and I'm going to be chatting away madly about everything that I've read in September. So I feel like these books have been sat on my windowsill judging me for a very long time, because I've been meaning to make this video for ages, and I'm really psyched up for it, and then I no longer have the time because I can't do it in half an hour. There's a lot of books here, and I know I talk a lot, so I was then putting it off, and then I'd be like, right now I have the time, but then I'm exhausted, and I'm like, I can remember nothing to say about these books. Hopefully the stars have aligned, and I can actually produce some form of slightly decentish video. But generally, it has been a really long time. I've read a lot of books since these ones, and I'm getting a lot of brain fog, so I have no idea if I'm going to make any sense or be coherent. I'm hoping to go back to where I do 2 videos a month, where I wrap up half the books and the other half, so then I can have them more in my brain, but we will see. It's a needs must situation, and this is what we're dealing with, and I want to talk about the books with you, so we're just going to go for it, and hopefully sense will come out my mouth, but I don't know. Welcome back everyone, if you have been here before. I do really appreciate it. I hope you've got a nice cup of tea, or you're enjoying doing some task and I can keep you company whilst you are doing it. And hello to anyone who has popped in. I make short and long video content, mainly more long video. I call my short videos short, but they're like 15 minutes. My long videos are about between 40 and an hour plus. I have no idea how long this one's going to take. We will find out together. But anyway, in the long videos, the camera keeps rolling and chaos happens. There's a variety of waffle, and we just go with the flow, really. So it is one shot and there is no editing. So here we are. Here's my little gimmick of a teacup. Clink, 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 clink. Right. I have no idea which books I'm going to be choosing to talk about first. I think possibly the order I read them in, if I can remember it. But firstly, I'm going to take a gulp of tea. So I hope you all have yours. I've been recently drinking red bush tea because I've run out of regular tea, and I had a lot of red bush tea, and I enjoy red bush tea, and so I'm going to enjoy some of that. But it's got a very different taste, and now I'm used to that. I kind of haven't drunk regular tea for a while. But I've now got some PG tips, and I'm quite excited about being back on the regular tea. Yeah, no, I feel more revived. I feel calmer with the red bush, but I need the energy to get me through this video. Okay, the waffle has got slightly out of hand. Let's see if we can rein it in. The first book that I'm going to talk to you about is The Henna Wars. This is by Abida Jaigiada, who is Irish with Bengali heritage. And I truly believed that I had this book recommended from Olivia. I thought Olivia had spoken about it on her channel, but she hadn't, actually. So I have no idea where I came across this book, but it sounded brilliant. So when I saw it in my local superstore, Aldi, for like £2 or £3, I immediately picked it up. This is a YA contemporary about social issues. There is also a romance nearly said elephant. It's not a romance elephant. There is a romance element in it as well. We have a lesbian love story. It's very much a coming of age book that explores finding your identity in yourself, being able to share it with your family. It explores themes of bullying. It explores themes of cultural appropriation, and there's a beautiful friendship between 2 sisters in this book as well, and I just love how it all comes together. It's exactly what I want when I read a contemporary YA. I love a contemporary YA about social issues, and this gave me everything I needed. I was so on board with the characters. I loved the sisters' relationship. I loved seeing the family come to terms and grow. And I really loved Nishat. Couldn't remember her name because it's been a while. I loved I loved Nishat, our protagonist, and her journey, and it was just such a delight. So if you enjoy a contemporary book, a contemporary YA, this is just such a good one. You're going to have a great time with this one. I felt all the emotions. I felt happy at lots of points, but I also felt really upset. I felt angry on Nishat's behalf, and you were just rooting for her to win, basically. Win at everything, win in life in all possible forms it takes. So it had was a great start to the month. This is one I took and started on holiday in August, but I didn't quite manage to finish it. So it definitely kind of filled easily into September, and it did not take me long to read. Like, I literally think it was the last day of August, possibly. Anyway, it did not take me long at all. I think it was like 2 or 3 days to kind of read this. It was really quick. The next book that I'm going to talk to you about is a middle grade. This is Ember Spark and the Thunder of Dragons by Abby Elphinstone. Sorry, burping. I love Abby Elphinstone's The Unmapped Chronicles. I just really enjoyed her narrative voice. It's so cozy and life-affirming, and you feel like you're being wrapped up in a big hug and told a story. And the author, you very much feel she's very child-friendly. So you feel like she's one of those really inspirational sort of like teachers or role models that you get, who will just always see the best in you and be rooting for you. And I just think that's a wonderful feeling to be having in a book. So having loved her other works, I was very excited to get hold of this one. This is a library book, and I've kind of had it looking on my shelf for a while, and I suddenly felt like it's fine. September is now the time. I'm going to pick it up. I don't have a huge amount of plans. I'm pretty free and easy. It's Ember Spark's time. This was one of the books that I was hoping might make its way onto the 2024 middle grade Reader's Choice Awards, but it hasn't got a huge amount of ratings, and I think this is possibly because this is very much like younger middle grade. I'd say this is much more of the sort of like 7, 8, 9 age ranges of middle grade rather than sort of like the 11 and 12. But it's still a really cozy story. If you're someone that likes a whimsical fantasy, it's really light. There is definitely stakes in here. There's an element of danger. There's an adventure in here. And it is about magical vets. It's set in Scotland. There's a really wonderful sort of time and place that you're immersed in. And there's a fantastic teacher. Let me tell you, this is one of the things that I loved. So this is the most Abby Elphinstone, to give you a taste of her style, which very much appeals to me. And it's one of my favourite characters from the book. Mrs. Rickety Knees creaked when she moved like a piece of antique furniture, and her face was a web of wrinkles. But despite her appearance, Ember never thought of her as old. She had a mischievous chuckle, a wild choice in leggings, today's had unicorns on, and a chihuahua called Baba Ganoush, who she kept inside her handbag. She wasn't chuckling now, though, and Baba Ganoush looked thoroughly unimpressed at having been dragged out in the rain. And this is also illustrated by Christina Kister, and we get a lovely illustration here of Mrs. Rickety Knees, which is a wonderful name. It's very typical of Abby Elphinstone's name. she does a great whimsical names. And in the picture we have Mrs. Rickety Knees with some very fancy glasses on, slightly tapered at the ends, and we can see the lovely unicorn leggings. I'm slightly jealous about those. And her walking stick is in the shape of a flamingo. Therefore, I feel if it was coloured, this would be bright pink. There is also kind of real life, Ember's home life is touched on in this book as well. Friendship is touched on in this book. So there is very much a woven together, which again is typical of Abby Elphinstone, of the whimsy of the fantasy, but with the real life kind of issues that lots of young children face, like normal things of like navigating life, building on your strength, trying to keep going. So it's just a warm and cozy middle grade fantasy. It's not an absolute favourite for me, but it gave me all the warm fuzzies that I wanted from it. And that was published in May, and I think either like right now, October, or in November, the second book, which I think is about a phoenix, is being published if you are at all interested. Then I read one you may have possibly heard me mention before. I read another middle grade, a very highly anticipated, one of my most anticipated books of the year, Amari and the Despicable Wonders by B.B. Alston. So I have been doing an Amari along in anticipation for this book. This is the third in what we now know is a 5-part middle grade fantasy series called The Bureau of Supernatural Investigations, or Amari and the Supernatural Investigations. I buddy read this with Tiffany, and I really need to go and look at my Discord because I know Stacey has just finished reading it and has left a whole host of all her thoughts on there. So I definitely need to kind of get in that and be responding to those and see what she thought about it. I have got a couple of lives I did about Amari if you are interested, and one was like starting it and the other was talking about it. So I went all into the nitty gritty and everything I thought about Amari. If you are interested in seeing my full thoughts, I will link the video here. So we continue where we left off in our story. There was a bit of a cliffhanger, so we get straight into that. We have more fantastical whimsy in this world, which B.B. Alston does so well. We went to a new place, which was exciting, and I really enjoyed it. We're introduced to some new characters, which again were delightful. The stakes are high in this, as they always are. And yeah, and again, I got emotional in this book. And I really want the next book. The plot I really enjoyed. I thought it was great. I enjoyed the objects of the Despicable Wonders that were mentioned. And I definitely think it's one that I'm going to love even more when I read it again, because it's very much, I was reading it because I needed to know what was happening. And I don't know if I was fully taking everything in at that time because I just needed to know, just needed to get there. But I had a brilliant time with Amari. It did not disappoint. The only thing I'll say is I wanted more Elsie. I just wanted a little bit more Elsie because we love Elsie. Elsie's one of our faves. I just needed a little bit more. That's all. That's it. That's the only thing I will say. Okay, I can't remember what I read next. I think I read a book. I think I read a book that I felt I needed to read, and it didn't go that well. So I'm going to talk about this YA fantasy. What is this book? I've totally forgotten. This is Cruel Illusions by Margie Fuston. This is part of my reading my book boxes. So I went through all my book boxes for 2022. So that's my Fairy Loot ones and my Shelter Box ones, and I'm trying to read all of them. I've done a prediction video where I guess what I think will be my favourites, where I'll place them on my list, and I want to now reflect on it and see if I was correct or not. So this is one of the ones I still needed to read. It's got a very pretty cover. We've got red foiling, we've got like a castle in the background, we've got roses on the sprayed edge, and it says win or die, a deadly competition, a magical secret society, a chance for revenge. I struggled a lot with this, and I think it is just because I couldn't get into it. I didn't think it was going to be my thing, and I tried, but I couldn't connect with the protagonist. I didn't quite get her stance. So she, I think, is a foster. I think she's a foster child with her brother. And her brother seems to have blended into the family really well. She's a little bit jealous, though I don't know if she actually says that, of how well her brother gets on with their foster brother. And I think she feels a little bit pushed outside. And it just feels a little bit, I just found her head a bit annoying to be in. Because it's either like, look, make the most of what you're trying to do, or be delighted that your brother's doing what he's doing so you can leave and do something else, and you can leave him in safe hands, if that's what you're feeling. So it was quite hard to get around her head. Her mum was killed by vampires. So she's got this vendetta, trying to find the vampire that killed her mum and kill them. And she comes across people who might have a similar skill set or one that she could be involved in. And it never quite makes it clear how they're going to benefit. It just feels very much sort of stumbly acrossy. And she doesn't seem convinced about that plan. She doesn't really seem interested. Like, she's got all these reasons why not to do it, but then reasons why she should. And it just feels a bit wishy-washy. Then there's some other characters that come along, and that feels wishy-washy. Like, I don't quite understand why they're interested in her. And there's this sort of kind of like competition, found family, but like there's so much, but it's not a found family because like people are hiding secrets from each other, and it just doesn't, I can't get behind them. I think that's my problem. Like, I couldn't quite get into the mindset of the characters. The characters just didn't work for me, and I'm very much more of a character reader. Unless the plot is incredible, I'm very much more of a character reader. So if you haven't got the characters, you've lost me on the plot. So I ended up skim reading. I kind of went skip to the middle of the book. Am I missing out on anything? And I immediately picked up the story again and was like, okay, so this is where they are. We've progressed to the next trial. We still don't really trust anyone. There could be romantic pairings happening, but we don't really know. Some people might be dodgy. And it just didn't seem to do anything interesting. I just couldn't get excited about it. And I skim read the rest of it and I was like, nah. Just, I can't, it's not even interesting enough to like rant about. Like, I didn't hate it. It just felt very bland for me. I just couldn't get into the story. So this just really did not work. It might work for you if you can connect with the characters, or if you're someone that's more plotty than character based, you might enjoy it or get something from it. I just think also I don't particularly, the atmosphere wasn't anything that particularly made me excited. I don't get particularly excited about vampires or about circuses, and it was trying to like combine those things. So if you enjoy those, then this might work better for you. Like, I don't know if it was like terrible. It just annoyed me. I just found it annoying. Not annoying, just boring. I just couldn't get into it. And being as I can't remember a huge amount about these books anyway, there's nothing that stuck in my head too much about this one, so I don't really have anything else to say. I will have a better look through it when I come to do my reflection on my predictions, but for here and now it was very meh, not interested, and I DNF'd it, so there we go. A more fun, positive, delightful fantasy experience was the adult fantasy The Sky on Fire by Jen Lyons. This was another book that I was really, really hyped for and anticipating that came out this year. So Jen Lyons is the author of the Chorus of Dragons series, which is one of my favourite epic fantasy series. She's just, the way she wove the plot together, the way the characters were, and just, it was very different with the tone of it. It was very snarky and sarcastic, and there was a wonderful like queer culture going on in her books as well. And just her world building is just so epic. You are really immersed into these worlds that she creates, and it's really different, and you can see the different cultures, you can see the different politics, you can see the different like histories and law and religion. It's just so, it's got a lot of depth in it. I can't quite explain it further. I feel words are eluding me. I'm still a bit on the fuzzy side, so apologies. But her world building is epic. I went into this with much lower expectations because it's a standalone. So I knew there was no way I was going to get the same feelings I had, for example, Memory of Souls, the third book, or I've forgotten the name of the fifth one. It's got a skull on it. I think it's called like The Gods of Death or something like that. Anyway, the latter three, I knew it was never going to hit the heights of the latter three, because for me, that's the work of the first two books, setting us up with the world, setting us up with the characters, and just like things coming back together and all of that fancy stuff. with the plotting and the fun and the chaos and that delight. I also, because it's a standalone, I wasn't expecting the same kind of structure that we got, because her structure was really different. You have 2 stories going along at the same time. You have footnotes from a character that's recording it, and it all kind of gets very involved, and it's hilarious. I was not expecting that from this one. But she did not disappoint in delivering an amazing world and an absolutely delightful, fun romp of chaos. And it was great. I did enjoy the characters. I didn't connect to them as much as I connected to the ones from Chorus of Dragons. There wasn't quite as much time to sit and breathe and grow with them, because she's got to wrap up a plot in just one book. But they were enjoyable. There was a throuple in this. Again, not as you're not as invested as you are in the Chorus of Dragons one, but you could very much kind of see the work in progress. You could see how you could kind of get into it. And again, I think there were moments where we could have had a bit more time with their emotional connections. We definitely got the sexual chemistry was there, but the emotional connection, I think we could have got a little bit more from if we could have spent a bit more time with them. The plot of this was fantastic. The world building, the settings in this were incredible. Like you can so vividly picture her world, and it was completely different to A Chorus of Dragons. She's just so talented with her world building. I don't know what she plans to do next. I just know I'm going to continue to pick up everything that she writes, because she can weave a good yarn, and she has me hooked. She has me in her hands. I want to know what's going to happen next, where our characters are going to go. I want to know how things work. And she can just set the scene for you, and you're there, and you slowly start piecing together how this works, how the world works. Again, she had a fantastic sort of queer positive community in this, like this concept of rings, where you kind of signify your sexual preferences, and how monogamous or committed you are, or if you're here for a bit of fun. It reminded me a lot of when I was at uni. We had what was called the traffic light bop. So the bop was the local canteen that just turned into a disco, and the traffic light bop would often happen like the first would be one of the first ones, where you'd have a red, orange or green sticker. So red was I'm taken, I'm not interested. Orange is maybe, and green was I'm free and easy. It reminded me a little bit of that, but slightly more nuanced. But it was really fascinating seeing how the societal norms were of all these different cultures within here, all these different mountains, and then contrasting that to the jungle and the different policies and politics that were going on. And the dragons are in charge. They are sentient, they are powerful, and the humans are essentially their puppet playthings. And there's relationships between dragons and humans, and it was fascinating to hear about, see. It was fascinating to find what had happened to the protagonist before, and just all these things. There were some secondary characters that I didn't kind of like click with, that I think could have been fleshed out a bit more, but there was 2 characters and their relationship that I was really invested in, focused on, and was very much ride or die for me, and I loved them and their relationship. I thought it was beautiful, but absolutely wonderful fun time. If you just want to read a fantasy, it's a standalone. It is a standalone epic fantasy. It's a high fantasy. Knock yourself out, have a great time. This is brilliant for that. In terms of emotional connection, in terms of like that part, it's not quite the same top tier as other fantasies that I've read, but in terms of world building, in terms of fun, in terms of plot, read The Sky on Fire. Highly recommend. Okay, complete change of pace to all of this. Another book that I've had on my plans for a while. Actually, no, I need tea. Sorry. The voice is starting to croak. That's much better. So a book that I've been nearly at the point of reading for quite a long time is A People's History of Heaven by Mathange Subnamaya. This, if you didn't see, was in my sort of trying to pin down my mood that I did in June. And I was very interested, and there were so many things in here I was excited about, but it just didn't quite hit the mood in the way I needed it to hit my mood at that point. If you're interested, I will leave a link here. But September was its time. It was its time. I needed a completely different change of pace. I was feeling a little bit fantasied out, and I was ready to kind of get emotional with these characters in here. So A People's History of Heaven is set in, is it Bangladeshi? A Bangalore slum called Heaven. And we follow 5 girls in this slum. We get sort of introduced to them sort of one by one, finding out their family's history, finding out how they kind of interact as a group. And it's the strength and friendship of them in here and their different qualities that is so beautiful and kind of pulled together in this story. So I just paused then because I know that I tabbed my books. I'm not a natural book tabber, so if I've tabbed something, it's because something has really stood out for me and I need to draw attention to it, remind myself how much I loved it, and share it with all of you. I think the first paragraph in this book is one of the most beautiful bits of writing I have read. I'm also going to share a few other things that I really enjoyed in this book as well. I think Mathange's way of writing is just, it's kind of like poetry, but it's poetry with a heart. Like, it's not just sort of empty flowery words. It's like that emotional core, in my opinion. So I've been using these tabs. I got them from, they came in a fairy loot. So the first one is a row of little books. And that's because I thought this particular line was just a really nice image, a really nice piece of writing. Sometimes a dress is more than a dress. Sometimes a dress is a parachute, a promise of a hurtling fall, an uncertain journey, a soft landing. I really enjoyed how that was described. And the dress in question is quite integral to one of the 5 girls in this book. The characters in here are also different. You have a variety of, there's 3 different religions that are covered in this book, and there are different sexualities, gender identities, but all of these strong friendships, all of these girls wanting something more. Some are outspoken girls, some are sort of quiet and shy girls, but all of them have got this strong bond of friendship, and they are just going to be there for each other no matter what, which is good because their slum is basically being threatened of being destroyed by bulldozers to make way for other developments, and they are saying, no, you're not doing this. This is our home. You can't just do that to us. Where are you going to put us? This is wrong. And their strength, and it's the mothers and the aunties and all the community in there as well, like trying to pull together and help out, and it's just beautiful and heartwarming, but also really sad and upsetting at the same time. So another one that I have tabbed here, I have got a candle because I thought this was a really nice, like, bright light moment that I thought was really that kind of like shone out to me from the page. And then I've got a key down here because I thought this is the key to life. It makes sense in my head. Anyway, I'm going to read it to you. So under the candle. In heaven, there are first families and second families, but there are other families too. Families born out of something more than blood. Families that cannot be erased with a new letter, a new story, a new neighbourhood, a new wife. And again, that is relating to one of the characters in this book. And it keeps on it keeps on going, sort of describing this present moment, and how this community is there and they're all caring for each other. Deepa and Neelma auntie argue, and Padma's brothers chant. Padma thinks of the silent post office full of love and loss and tragedy, of stories begging to be rewritten. This is the key. She thought she would miss it, the power, the possibilities, the bending of time. But here, in this chaos of sisters and mothers and brothers, of families lost and found, here in this glorious present, she doesn't miss a thing. I just think that is just so poignant. Just like we can like put ourselves in the past and focus on the past. We can like throw ourselves to like the what ifs or the planning for the future. But one of the things that is renowned for good mental health is trying to be in the present, in this moment, in what you have now, and not missing life, just being in that moment and just finding the joy in what you have at this moment. Not realistic for all of the time, I'm not saying that, but I just thought that that was really beautiful and really beautifully put. I kind of don't really want to say any more in terms of like the plot or in terms of the characters, but just there's so much heart in this book, and the writing is gorgeous, and it's just such a good story. I really want to go and find more things that she's written because I had such a good time with this. This is definitely going to be one that I will be keeping, dipping in and out of, possibly rereading when I hit that moment again, and it was fantastic, and I'm so pleased that I found the right moment to read it in, and I got to really enjoy it, and it just hit home in the best way. Okay, 4 more books to go. I'm going to go for another buddy read. So this is Juno Dawson's Queen Bee. This is the prequel to Her Majesty's Royal Coven. It's a little novella, and it is set at the start of the, well, Her Majesty's Royal Coven, isn't it? It's set at the start of that, so it's where it all began. It's the origin story. And it is told by the lesbian lover of Anne Boleyn. I had a great time with this. Again, I wasn't expecting huge things because when I understood it was a novella, I'm like, well, it's just an extra bit of fun for us until we get the next book. I'm excited. I love Juno Dawson's writing voice. I love her sort of snarky sarcasm that she has in this, and the fun. So I was very keen to kind of see what she did with Anne Boleyn. I've also enjoyed seeing certain other characters, such as Lady Rochester, that are prominent if you have read much about the Tudor court at the time. So all of that was very intriguing. And what I also enjoyed as well, and it makes me think of Six. I am a big fan of Six the musical by Lucy Moss and Toby Marlowe. I enjoyed the fact that Henry wasn't really present in this. It wasn't about Henry. This was about the women of the court, and this was about their difficulties and their power and their witchcraft. So I enjoyed how the story started off, like where we were, and it kind of goes back and forth between the past and the present. And it was a lot of fun. I would have enjoyed it even more if this had been turned into like a full-length novel, if this wasn't just like a fun writing project for Juno Dawson, if it was like a full-on pushing out this really intriguing story that we are to go wild over, because I think there could have been so much about the courtly politics. There could have been so much more like threat of exposing, of people having, you know, vicious kind of like one-upments. It's a very much kind of like knife fight, political game, life and death situations made around the court. Like, Henry is very volatile and is quite happy to execute people who were his best friends. It's not a safe place to be. I imagine it's very exciting. People get a bit drunk on power heavy. And it was really going to be fun to kind of see the witchcraft element in that. And I think we could have had a really fun kind of power struggles within here. You know, just like feeling these women walking around this court, being aware that they could be called witches, that they could be exposed, that they could be, you know, sentenced to death. And just, you know, their lives being on the line, this very tricky life on the edge moment throughout the whole thing. I think that could have been really, really fun to have kind of gone into a bit more, especially with like the power balance of Anne. Like we get Anne's rise and you get her descent, and that would have been really fun. We got it in snippets, but it would have been fun if we could have been the living, breathing present and felt that tension and that anxiety and that fear for the characters that we love. But you can't do that in a novella. There is not enough space, there is not enough time. What I did enjoy, which I wasn't expecting, was seeing a different class of witch. So you get the courtly politic ladies, but you also get a working class set. That was fun, and I would love to have seen that explored even more. There were fun little nods to moments of history. There were fun little things to kind of how the story would go and where it would go from there. I enjoyed all of that. Wasn't mind-blowing, but it was fun. It was like a nice addition to this world that we're in. So it was an enjoyable read. I buddy read this with Shelley from Percy's Read Everything, or Percy Does Everything. I always forget it. I'm so sorry, Shelley. I'm so rubbish. Anyway, I buddy read with her, and it was a lot of fun, especially because we both saw Juno Dawson at Yalk last year, and I love watching Shelley like live vlogs of her reading Her Majesty's Royal Coven and the chaos that comes out of it. It's great fun. So yeah, it was great to read this, to buddy read this with Shelley. Okay, just 3 more books to talk you through. I'm going to start with the last middle grade that I have, and it's another buddy read. It is Pages & Co, the Book Smugglers, which is the 4th book in the series by Anna James. Buddy reading this sort of sporadically, loosely, with Kelly from Kelly Reads a Lot and Stacey. It's in my Discord middle grade mad chat. We've been reading the first 3 books. I was all over the shop with this one. I thought I'd be able to have time before I went on holiday to read it, and then I didn't, so I didn't read it in August. And I am terrible. Up until this point, I still have not, now I've finished it, given my thoughts, responded to Kelly's thoughts, or responded to Stacey's thoughts within it all. I'm a terrible buddy reader, but I will get there, and I look forward to reading and chatting about it when I do. We do get a slightly different kind of direction for the stories now. This was split. So the overarching plot for Pages & Co 1 to 3 was kind of wrapped up. But it had some new ideas that were then taken and explored more in this one. So we also have another character. So we've got 2 characters that we see the story through. We see it through Tilly and we see it through Milo. We got some more book wandering into, was it a couple of books or was it just the one? No, it was just 1 book. I'm going to check now. No, it was 2. It was 2. We visit the Railway Children and we visit the Wizard of Oz in this book. But it's a lot more about kind of this wider mystery, deeper book magic, things that have been unexplored, and interesting kind of plots that are going on, and the story closes on one aspect of it, but there is still definitely more to cover, which I think is going to be dealt with in books 5 and 6. I enjoyed this. Again, I always just can't quite settle with the endings. It still feels a bit loose, and I know they're moving into book 5 and 6, but within this whole kind of point of the story, it still feels a little bit loose in terms of the adults with things. I can't completely put my finger on it. It's a fun whimsy. It's a great enjoyable ride, but in terms of sort of like the logic and kind of the neatly tying up, I need a little bit more from it, but that's my adult brain. I'm aware this is a middle grade. So I'm having a lot of fun with these books, but I kind of struggle with some aspects of it. So I just need to kind of like leave those kind of bits of my brain just like down and just kind of enjoy the ride. When I get properly on the train and enjoy the ride, it's lovely, and then we just kind of let the other bits pass me by. But the whimsy is great fun. Obviously, there's the love of books in there, and that's always enjoyable. I then have a library book, When I Was the Greatest. This is by Jason Reynolds and illustrated by Akram Grimmay. I have been really enjoying reading Jason Reynolds books this year. I've read some previously, but I've read a few this year, which has been really nice. I've read his middle grade. I've read the one he co-wrote with Brendan Keeley, American Boys, I think. I can't remember now. Anyway, I've been enjoying them, so I was keen to pick up another one and read it. So this is his first novel. I think he wrote poetry and collaborated with some other things, but this is his first novel that he wrote. And it was full of heart of the people in the story. It's YA contemporary, but with social issues, about different family lives, different aspirations, different ways of like continuing to live. It explores, there is some mental health neurodivergent. So in this book, sorry, I had to go deal with my children because I heard a shout. You may have heard it as well. It's always a sign you need to go and check they're all right. So in this book, we have got our protagonist, Ali, and his best friend, Noodles, who lives next door, along with his brother, Needles. And the three of them sort of hang out on the front step quite a lot. And it's kind of how they are. They end up sort of going somewhere, something happens, and it's how the fallout of that kind of comes together and kind of things that kind of led up to that. I love Ali's mum. She's fantastic. I love the mum representation going on in here as well. Ali's family setup is that he lives with his mum and his sister. He has contact from time to time with his dad, but his dad has kind of been, I don't know if in and out of prison, but definitely he's been to prison, and he's been kicked to the curb by his mum for not cleaning up his act, but his heart's in the right place. So it's sort of a bit of a messy relationship, but it's sort of working for them. And I always enjoy like seeing all these different families sort of coming together and being sort of represented and shown, and how it's not quite as simple as all that, because there is love and care, but there's also the difficulties of living as well. And I thought that was really done beautifully. Noodles and Needles, they are nicknames. Situation is slightly different. They don't get the same mothering from their mother, different family setup. And Needles has got Tourette's. And I thought it was, again, I'm not someone who is at all experienced in what it's like to have Tourette's, or knows of people, or has done any research on it. I felt that this was a really sincere representation and a respectful representation of it. And I just really enjoyed it. Needles is my favourite. I would love a continuation, but from Needles' point of view. I want a book with Needles as the protagonist. That's what I would love. It gave me everything I was expecting from Jason Reynolds. The heart, the hardness of life situations, and it was just, I just thought it was really well done. I can't rank my Jason Reynolds actually, because they're all very different and unique in their own way, but I definitely, Needles has my heart. I love Needles and Ali's mum. They are awesome. So yeah, When I Was the Greatest lived up to what I was hoping for from Jason Reynolds. Okay, got one book left, and I think I've left it till last because I think I'm going to find it the most difficult to talk about, because it's really impactful. There's a lot in it, and I know I'm not going to do it justice. And that is my non-fiction that I've been reading on and off since May. They, She, He, How We Talk About Gender and Why It Matters by Schuyler Bailar. who I apologise, I've been pronouncing his name incorrectly, but I heard it on an interview and I'm now going to say it correctly. So apologies that I wasn't saying it correctly before. I'm going to link the interview in the description box. Do take a look at it. I think it's a really interesting subject matter. If you are at all interested in trans rights or other people's lives that are different to your own, I think it's a really important, or if you're interested in sport, you know, books and sport do mix, then I definitely recommend looking at it. So I read this book. I started possibly at the end of April, beginning of May, had a pause June and July, read it again in August, and then finished in September. During that time, we have had the 2024 Olympic Games and the Paralympic Games, where we sadly are living in a world where people seem to need to comment on other people's lives and call witch hunts. And hurt and harm there has been a lot of because of this. And I think it's very telling of the hatred that comes from this. I'm also going to link another video. This is a video by Jamie Rains, the author of The T in LGBT. He is a trans man. He has studied, he's a PhD, he's a doctorate in gender studies. So he has a lot of scientific research and facts at his disposal. And he kind of goes into this story that came out through the summer about a cisgendered black woman, Imane Khelif, who is a boxer. She won the gold medal in her weight category and was subject to a barrage of hatred from right-wing anti-trans people who decided it was their business to say whether or not they thought she was the gender that she is. One, it's appalling to treat anyone that way. Two, it doesn't matter whether she's cis or trans, no one should be treated that way. And three, it just absolutely goes to show how, which is one of the points that Jamie really pulled out when he was discussing it, that this hateful like witch hunt that just kind of spirals out of control, that newspapers will just not actually get truth and facts to stories. They'll just go off gossip and hearsay because there was absolutely no evidence that Imane Khelif was male, trans, or had been any other gender. And it's nobody's business, really. I can't do it justice. Please go and look at Jamie's video that covers that story in a really sensitive, balanced way. One, looking at the evidence, and two, looking at, but it doesn't matter that Imane Khelif is a cisgendered woman who has been treated abhorrently. It shouldn't happen to anyone. Even if she was trans, this would not have been okay. And then that is covered. So this really made me, I've always been interested in how people are, especially women, are treated in sports. I was always very moved by Caster Semenya's story about how she was treated and vilified because she was really talented at her chosen sport and was winning. There is definitely a, I don't know what the right word is, but there is definitely a not coincidence. That's not the right word. I haven't got the right words at my disposal. But basically, black women who are amazing at their sport are subjected to this horrible treatment that people will then question, one, their gender, two, their like, you know, levels, or are they on drugs? Because it's like you aren't allowed to be as good as you are at that sport because we don't feel you should be. And it's one, derogatory to women, two, it's racist, and we continue to see it time and time again. So with Caster Semenias, with Imane Khelif, Serena Williams also was subjected to this. I hadn't thought of that until it was mentioned during one of these conversation pieces, and then I was like, yes, I do remember actually that coming up when I was a child, about, you know, Venus and Serena Williams were at that point taking the world by storm. It was, my dad's a big tennis fan, I'm not, but I remember like hearing about all of these things that they were doing, and people were then like suggesting that maybe they were male. It's just ridiculous. It's just so ridiculous and so upsetting. So having that, I've then got a much bigger interest in sport and how people are treated. And I think that is one of the kind of biggest things that people who might be trans allies on most things are then like, oh, but sport, that's a bit of a dodgy one. Please, again, one, read they, she, he. Two, read the interview where they have this discussion with a lot of trans athletes. There were no trans athletes in the 2024 Olympic Games. There were trans athletes in the Paralympics. And please go and do your own learning from people who are actually, one, knowledgeable about sport, two, are trans and these are their lives, three, have genuine qualifications to talk about this. Don't just listen to whatever dramatic headlines have just been splashed across the front pages, or clickbait things, or things, sensationalized pieces to make people cry out, and they are the scapegoats of right-wing politics, basically. Which leads me on to say, this was a very important time to be reading this book. So I had it before, I was reading it before we had all of that in the news, and then I was reading it after all of that had come about. This book is full of so many things. This is definitely a brilliant book if you have read a lot of information about what it's like to be trans, if you've read some memoirs, if you've read kind of like an introduction to what it's like to live your life as a trans person, what kind of things trans people have to deal with. I'm obviously coming at this from the point of view as a cis person because that is my lived experience. I can't say off the top of my head because I haven't looked yet if people have reviewed this book who are trans and can give you sort of a more personal opinion, like how very much it will hit differently for them, and I imagine it will hit differently depending on everyone's circumstances, you know, taking into account being of a different heritage, of being non-binary, of being a trans woman, of being a trans man, sort of how it would all different, of being someone who's interested in sport or not interested in sport, or who has felt like they're not able to kind of join in something they have every right to join in with because of their transness, or because of their heritage, because of their how other people in society view them. All of that will kind of hit home differently and give a different experience to reading this, and give a different kind of opinion of it. I can only go with what I have, which is a very privileged position of being a cis-het white woman. That's the only thing I can go on. But it was so eye-opening from many things. It felt like a much deeper dive into looking at myself as someone who supports the trans community, and exploring are there any kind of underlying things that I still need to be addressing within myself? Are there better ways that I can support the trans community? And also, again, you've got some memoir from here from Schuyler Bailar mixed with I probably should have said this at the beginning, I told you I'm all a bit fuzzy, but Schuyler Bailar is a swimmer. Can't remember the level of swimming, but really professional swimmer, competition level swimmer, who has swum for the who swam sort of like as a teenager and a young person on the women's team, and then when he was living as his true self was then swimming on the men's team, and sort of the difficulties that he had with that, as well as like there were some euphoric moments but also some very dysphoric moments. There was a lot of obvious transphobia, and then there was some societal transphobia, or some transphobia that kind of snuck in, and just like different ways of dealing with it. And it just really made you think about how exhausting it is every day to have to allow yourself to be who you are, and how exhausting it must be to always feel that you've got to prove you have the right to be who you are. Everyone should just automatically have the right to be who they are without people feeling they need an opinion or questioning it. There were so many moments I knew with this book that it was going to be hard hitting, that it's going to make me feel a lot, and I wanted to be able to do it justice, so I needed to be reading it at the right time that I could properly take it in. As you can see, again, I have tabbed different parts of this book. I'm not going to go through all of them right now. I would like to. I'm going to go through some of them. I would love to go through this in more detail and kind of give it its own review. Whether or not I will have the opportunity to do that because of like just time, I don't know, but I would love to. But this was a brilliant nonfiction. Schuyler Bailar's voice explaining things was just so fantastically done. Like Schuyler Bailar's has gone on to lead talks about sort of being inclusive to trans people. You know, he is sort of pioneering in allowing these difficult conversations, in inviting people to come and ask hard questions, and being able to give people that information in a way that makes them think about it, accept it, and not get defensive. I just cannot imagine the patience that he has, and just the levels of exhaustion it must take. So there were a lot of aspects of this book. There is also a lot of aspects of sport and transport in here, and it's definitely helped me kind of explore my interest in this, and pointing me in the direction of further nonfiction books that I want to read to kind of look further into this topic, and this kind of like subcategory of trans people in sport. I think it's really important. I've gone down such rabbit holes for reading this. I found myself looking on YouTube at this. I think it was possibly Congress level discussion of sporting teams, like youth sport, and this discussion around that, and two very different governors' opinions on it, and it was very right wing in the comments, and I decided to like dip my toes in and say some stuff in there, because I don't have the emotional baggage. You know, I'm not trans, so yes, I can get angry about it, I can feel incensed on behalf of other people, but I'm not being personally attacked, which must be excruciating and take so much strength, like constantly having to deal with that. So I felt I could kind of throw myself out there for a little bit, but even then it's really nerve-wracking and quite scary to feel like people are gonna like talk rubbish and like shout you down and things like that. But yeah, so I went in all kind of rabbit holes. I definitely want to be looking at that more and being able to like have things to say back. Anyway, I feel I've strayed very far from the topic of this book, but I definitely read it at the right time for me. It was very powerful, and I highly recommend it if you are wanting to explore more in this subject. If you haven't explored this subject before, I recommend starting off with something like Gender Euphoria, where you get to hear lots of different like short stories and different kind of people's totally lost words for this. It's kind of, it's lots of little like essays and like memoirs from a variety of people across a whole sort of like a cross section of humans. I also recommend the T in LGBT as like a starter point to kind of go into if you have, you know, very little knowledge of trans issues, of what it's like to be trans. That's a really good starting point. This is still good if you're someone that enjoys kind of, it's not academical, but it just goes more in depth. There's just a lot of a depth into it. So if you feel you definitely want to kind of, you know, go straight in, by all means do. But I definitely recommend it for people who want to be exploring these things more. Okay, I'm going to look through my tabs now. Okay, just had a quick look through on my tabs because obviously I did a lot of preparation for this video. Like I said, these books have been just sat on my shelf. I was prepared and ready, but then time happened and the stars didn't align. So I'm grabbing the bull by the horns and the stars are going to align now. Waffle, waffle, waffle. But yeah, I definitely felt very angry on behalf of the trans community reading this. I also felt very emotional at some of the lovely points, but also sad because the lovely points should be normal. It shouldn't be thought of an exception. It should be the rule. So yeah, there were so many moments when I needed to like just pop this book down and take a deep breath and kind of like take it all in and let all of the information I've just taken in kind of just properly fill me up. There's so much in this book. It's not really a long book. It's under 400 pages of a non-fiction. It's quite big though, like it's bigger than my head. But yeah, but the subject matter within it is big. So I'm going to read you a few things. The final part of this book. So I think again, Schuyler Bailar has done a beautiful job with forming the book. I don't know if that's the right one. But the introduction to the book, it was a really like connecting human moment, talking about his enjoyment in swimming and like those sporting moments, and then the end part of the book is a truly emotional family moment, and it's just beautiful. And that whole ending I wish I could read to you, but I'm not, because I want you to go and read it yourself. But it's beautiful. I've written down about the ending. She says, not finding the page. This ending was perfectly placed and warmed my heart. The final line says it perfectly. And I've got a load of tabs all over the ending. And there is a little, after the ending, there is a dear reader. So chapter 23 is just a little letter from Schuyler Bailar to the reader, which is me and you. And I've tabbed that for myself as well, from what I kind of needed to take from the book. I'm going to tell you all the other tabs. So the first one I think is very relevant, and it's this argument that transphobes always likes to give, and also, you know, we can also add on to this homophobes, racist people, ableist people, their need for free speech. This dangerous and manipulative twisting of free speech has garnered thousands of supporters. But at the heart of the free speech rhetoric is one's own agency. They argue that they should be allowed to use the words they want to describe others. Isn't that free speech after all? No, not exactly. Telling someone else who they are through using incorrect pronouns is not about your self-expression, your own identity, or your beliefs. It's about disregarding, demeaning, and controlling another person. In reality, respecting someone else's identity and calling them the pronouns they've requested centers on recognizing another person's self-determination and the ability to self-express, and costs you nothing. That whole paragraph, I was like, yes, 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 yes. Beautifully worded and very relevant, and everyone should hear it. The next couple are the emotional things that hit me, and this is Schuyler and his dad. I choked out, "Dad, I'm transgender." He hugged me tighter. "It's okay. It's all going to be all right," he mumbled as the tears flowed. Since coming out publicly and becoming a speaker and educator, my dad has joined me at numerous conferences and presentations. When asked why or how he was able to support me, he's always replied quite simply, "When your child is crying and obviously in pain, what do?" He always pauses to allow the audience a moment to consider. You hug them, you hold them, you be there. It's that simple. It is that simple, and it is also not. More than half of trans kids coming out to their parents, unfortunately, do not share my experience. So that obviously demonstrates the bit I was talking about, where there's a lot of emotional moments which are lovely, but they should be the rule, not the exception. And it's such a shame that it's not the case. And that's why these conversations, these discussions, these books are so important, because there is a lot of work to do to get there, to get us there, for this to be the rule and not the exception. And the final thing I wanted to talk about is one that was kind of a new concept for me. So I really appreciated having these thoughts put in my head. It's not something I'd considered before, but it's something that I think is so important to think about and acknowledge. So Schuyler Bailar talks about what's known as tone policing. You might be familiar with this. I wasn't. So I'm going to use Schuyler's words to explain what that is. Tone policing demands that ideas are communicated in a particular way that is palatable to the receiver, usually calm, kind, patient. Tone policing dismisses communication delivered in an angry, frustrated, or otherwise negative manner. And again, I think this is something that I imagine, again, because I'm in the privileged position of being cis white het, I imagine this must also be similar to anyone in the LGBTQ plus community, not just specifically trans, but also anyone who has to explain what makes them different to the societal exceptional norm. So anyone with a disability, trying to explain why things might need to be different to them as opposed to your typical person. And also anyone who is of a different heritage or different culture, who has to explain themselves again to people who are possibly saying racist things and not realizing what they're saying is actually racist, or realizing what they're saying is actually ableist. So again, tone policing, and I have definitely heard this within the Black experience of sort of like the white woman's tears and not wanting to be labelled as the angry Black woman or the angry Black voice. And a lot of girls, this definitely comes across in a lot of the YA works I've read about girls wanting to be able to speak, be loud, share their voice, shout, and feel they are having to kind of tone down to be the right kind of Black girl. The tone policing thing, I think, is a really important thing to kind of to discuss. And it is something very much about the receiver and not about the person giving you that information. And although the next bit I'm also going to be talking about relates specifically to Schuyler and being trans, I think it can definitely kind of works on an intersectional level. I think it definitely works across anyone who is seen not the societal norm for the same reasons. So the crucial distinction is validity versus productivity. When someone asks me an inappropriate question, it is absolutely valid for me to get upset or answer angrily. It is not always productive, however. It is important to ask, productive for whom? And Schuyler goes on to explore this question, talking about the 3 different options. Productive for the inappropriate question asker, which is usually the one that we think about. Productive for me, so the wronged party that has just had something horrible said to them. Or productive for the greater society of others and the purpose of learning. So Schuyler explains, because he wants to educate, he chooses to prioritise the benefit of the question asker and general society instead of himself. And this is a really important point here that comes with the tone policing. And you see it again, like when I dabbled in the outside my echo chamber of kindness and inclusivity and diversity and common civility, when I allowed myself into those other spaces. This tone policing, people were then very dismissive of people who got angry, and you know, and this kind of idea of, we should be able to have a civil conversation, you should be able to answer these points instead of being angry. It is, and this is the point that I think is really important, and again, I think this point is not just limited to trans people. I think this is definitely true of anyone who has an inappropriate question asked to them because of a community they belong to. It is not every trans person's job to educate you on transness because they are trans. And Schuyler goes on to say that it is my job in speeches, when consulting and hearing this book, in scenarios where I choose to maintain a calm disposition. I've not only chosen to do so, but I've likely been paid to do so. Recognising this is likely not the case for other trans folk in your life. So know this: if you are an inappropriate, disrespectful or uncomfortable question, a trans person's angry response is valid. Do not expect them to offer their pain to you on a silver platter. Your question might seem harmless to you, but that trans person might have been asked it more times than they've been gendered correctly. So yes, you need to accept the impact and consequence of your actions that align with systematic oppression and take responsibility for your part in perpetuating it, regardless of the intention. So, like I said, the book dives kind of deeper into the subject matter than I have personally experienced before. If you are someone well read in this, then maybe it's not the case for you. But I found this book really insightful, really important, definitely one that I will need to keep coming back to and keep rereading. And I'm so pleased that I got to share it with you. Okay, that is everything that I read in September. I don't feel I did too badly. I feel we've managed to get through these 10 books in a reasonable amount of time. So I feel quite chuffed with that, to be perfectly honest. And I didn't forget too many things, so hooray! If you have enjoyed this, please do give me a little like, because that's really nice. If you like the vibe, why not subscribe, because that's always fun. And please get chatty in the comments. If you've got any opinions to give me, I would love to hear them. And let me know what you've been reading recently. Are any of these books interesting to you? Have you had a different reading experience to me? I mean, did you love Cruel Illusions? Please tell me all of your thoughts on it if you loved it. I would love to hear someone else's opinion on it, because I think that's great. So yeah, that's everything I wanted to say. Thank you so much for sticking around. Happy reading, everyone.